Hi, this will be a short video on let, var, and const in JavaScript. These are keywords that you use when you define variables or declare variables. Let's open up brackets here. I'm going to use brackets for the example. And I've got a file here that's named index.html. And for this example, I'm just going to add a script tag, and I'll write some JavaScript in my script tag. So I'll just make a hello here, and this hello console log hello will print the word hello to the console. I'm going to open this up in Chrome, and then I'm going to right click and choose inspect, and then I can see if I switch to the console here, I see the output here. It says hello, right? And that's what I told it to do. I told it to print this, right? So we're going to do all these examples with let, var, and const just by printing the output to the console and see what we get, okay? So we can get rid of this thing right now because we know that everything's working, right? So what is var, let, and const? What do they do? Well, the classic way to define variables in JavaScript is with the keyword var. So if I say name equals Bart, right? And then I say, console.log name. Then over here in the console, I should see Bart. Let me actually make that text a little bigger. There we go, right? So I'll see Bart here. And I've declared this with the var keyword, okay? So what if I declared another variable, like I said, actually we'll do it with const. Actually, why don't we just change this one, right? What if I declare this with const, C-O-N-S-T, right? When I save and then refresh here in the browser, it still says Bart and everything is the same. What if I declare this with let? Oh, same thing, right? Okay, so var, let, and const let us declare variables, okay? And essentially the variables we declare, work in the same way. Variables have always worked with the keyword var, but with let and const, a few things change. And these things change, the changes concern two features. One of them is called scope, and the other one is called mutability, okay? When we create a variable with var and let, those variables are mutable. So that means that when I declare this variable with let, I can change the name to something else. So I can say name equals Maggie, okay? And when I refresh here, I see Maggie in the console because the name was Bart, and then I changed it to Maggie, right? What if I change this to const? Okay, so if I set this to const, const is short for constant, okay? And something that's constant doesn't change, right? So when I change this to constant and const and I refresh, I get an error and it says, hey, assignment to a constant variable at this line number 5, okay? And it's saying like, hey, you made an error because you tried to assign something to this variable, and you're not allowed to assign something to it. You can only declare it once, and then it keeps that value forever. It's immutable, cannot be changed, cannot be mutated, okay? If I make this a let, everything works again, okay? If I change it to a var, well, that's okay too. Var and let are both mutable. They can change. Const is immutable, cannot change. Okay, so if I make that a var and I refresh, I still get Maggie in here because I had Bart and then I change the value. Okay, so that's the first thing, mutability. Const is immutable. Var and let can be changed. Okay, what's the next thing? What scope? Okay, so scope, it determines like where a variable is visible inside your program. Okay, var is function scope. Let and const are both block scope. So what that means is that if I was to create a variable called name, and I've declared it outside in the script tag. This makes it essentially global to my whole JavaScript application. If I make a function and I call it test, I don't know, right? And then inside the test function, I use the var keyword and I say test pi equals 3.14. If I say console.log pi, and then I call my function, right? I'm going to execute or invoke the function test on this line right here. When I run my program, I can see 3.14 because I called on the function, and then the function declared a variable, and that variable had a value, and then I printed the value. This variable pi is only available inside this function, so it's working fine here. But if I tried to say console log pi outside of the test function, then I get an error. It says pi is not defined, right? Because the scope, like where we can see something, like where we can see the variable pi, is only inside this function. So the scope of pi is the test function. Okay? So var is function scoped. Okay? If I change this to a let, it will be the same thing. Okay? In this case, though, pi is block scoped and it's scoped to the block, so it actually acts the same as a var in this case, and const would do the same thing too. And actually, pi would be best as a const, right? Because the value for pi never changes, right? So let's refresh that, and we can see that those work the same, okay? Because we don't get the variable outside of the function, but we do get it inside the function. So then what's really the difference? It seems like they're kind of almost the same. Well, here's a big change, okay? What if I make a variable here and I make it a const and I say this is the count, okay? And I say const count, we're going to count to 10. And then what I want to do is I want to use a for loop. And inside my for loop, I'm going to set this up. This is the way everybody does it. They say for variable I equals 0. And let's count while I is less than count. And every time we loop through our loop here, we'll say count plus equals 1. So that means every time we execute this for loop here, we're going to add 1 to I. And then inside the for loop, we'll say console.log. How about, actually, I'm going to use this new syntax here with the template string, and we'll say count equals, and I'll say I here, right? Okay. And now if I was, let's get rid of this thing right here because that'll just generate an error. We'll call the test function, and we'll run our loop inside the test function. And when I refresh this, you can see it says count equals 0 to 9, right? Now, watch what happens here. What if I say console.log and I say I, okay? And then I'll say, let's use another one of those template strings here, and we say I equals, and then we'll do $I right here, okay? So now watch what happens. I'm going to refresh here, and we can see that my loop, it started on 0. It counted 10 times, or it counted to 9, right? So 0 to 9 is 10, right? But when it got to a count of 10, when we added 1 to I and it went from 9 to 10, that was not less than count. So the loop ended, and we got to here, and then we printed out the value for I, and it is 10, right? Now, here's the thing. I is declared right here with the var keyword. So var is function scoped. That means that I belongs to this entire function. It looks up and it finds the enclosing function, right? So it's enclosed in this test function, and it scopes itself to this function. Okay, so I is actually available throughout this entire function. Okay, let's do this a little bit differently. What if I change this from var to let? Now I can't use a const here because I'm going to change the value for I, right? So if I do const, I can't actually change it, right? So I'm going to say let, right? And now watch what happens here, right? I'm going to refresh it, and our count worked, right? So I is counting 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And when we get to here and we add 1 to I and it becomes 10, we end the for loop, and then we try to print out the value for I, and I get an error, and it says I is not defined. So I is not defined because it is scoped to the block. So let and const are both block scoped, and that means that for any code block, that a code block we can kind of always think of as these curly braces. So anytime we have curly braces, that's a block, okay? And let and var, if they're declared within this block, they're only available inside that block. They don't exist outside the block. If we declare this with var, then JavaScript looks up for the enclosing, it looks up at the enclosing function, and then it scopes the variable to that function. So by putting var here, this variable I is scoped to this entire function here for these curly braces. But if I use a let here, then this I belongs only inside, or exists only inside, this for loop. Okay, so that's the big difference between const, var, and let. Okay, const is immutable, and the value can't change. Let is mutable but block scoped. Const is also block scoped, and var is function scoped. Okay, so essentially, just on that note on var, if I put var I equals 0 here, it's kind of like JavaScript is actually doing this. It's moving I up to the top like this, and then, you know, kind of rearranging my code. So I'm just using the I here, but I'm declaring it at the top of this function. So it's available throughout this entire function. Okay, so anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope that explains the difference between var, let, and const. And note that if we use a let here, since it's a block, that also is the same for if statements and switch statements and any construct in JavaScript that has a code block. And you can even do this. If you just write the curly braces like that, you can declare a variable inside here. I can say secret variable equals 99, and if I console log secret, we will get the value here. But if I tried to log it outside of these curly braces, I'll get an error. Okay, let's give it a try here. So I'll refresh that. Actually, I'm getting this error first because that one happens first. I'm going to delete that one and then do it again. And then you can see it says secret is not defined, and it says on line 20. So I get the 99 here on line 17, but when I get to line 20, this one doesn't exist, right? Because it's stuck inside this block. So actually you can just declare a block with the curly braces in any place. So anytime you have these curly braces, that's a block. Okay, so anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope that helps you understand var, let, and const.